Welcome to another UTS Startups Confession. Smooth. Tell me, so Alex, you're one of my favourite people and working in one of my favourite areas. Tell me about the robotic algae farmers at UTS.
Well, aside from being a mouthful, so we have some robotic algae farmers here at UTS, and we're the only people in the world to have robotic algae farmers. So we have big deal. We have a special facility here called the Algae Phenomics Facility, which has giant robotic arms that looks after, shakes, gives them temperature, gives them lots of carbon dioxide, and grows up to 5,000 different algae strains at once. And then we screen them for really important compounds that we can use to make new products.
Okay, so you may not know this at home, but UTS is a hotbed for that kind of activity and identifying new strains and applications for them, research around them, correct?
Yes.
So, going back, actually, let's start with that. What can I use algae for?
What problem have you got?
Yeah.
So there are a whole bunch of different things you can use algae for. You can use algae to capture things like carbon, you can make new products. Anything that you currently use fossil fuels for, you can pretty much make with algae, because the whole reason we have fossil fuels is because algae just got smushed in the Earth's crust a really, really long time ago and turned into fossil fuels. So if we're kind of thinking about ways that we can divest around from fossil fuels and start making new products, or ways that we can capture carbon and help mitigate the effects of climate change, algae's your girl.
Okay, so I know we've got some great entrepreneurs in the room, or we'll have 1,000 watching this over the next month or two. What have you seen different entrepreneurs using algae for? Let's help them kind of ideate and think of what they could apply it to in their startups. Yeah,
sure. I'll give you some props. So these are some of the things that we've had come out of our lab. So not necessarily what you would see out of a startup, but I've certainly seen lots of really cool things from startups. So we've got everything from seaweed tile, which you can use for all sorts of different things. We've got different types of plastics, which are obviously really cool when you think about that most plastics are fossil derived. They are made from oil. You just get that algae oil instead and make a plastic, all the way to things like fabric and fibre, which is made out of 100% seaweed. So there's some really cool things that have been coming out of research. In terms of entrepreneurs and the sorts of things that they do, I have seen everything from new types of ink to put on swing tags to new types of shoes, all the way through to alternate types of seafood.
Okay. Alternate types of seafood.
Yes.
Tell me more.
Well, because, there's obviously quite a few issues with people eating seafood traditionally. Some people have issues with seafood farming. Some practices are unsustainable. So I think a lot of people there have just been let's cut out the middleman. What does seafood usually eat in the ocean? Algae. Let's just make some seafood out of algae. So I've seen everything from smoked salmon to prawns to alternate fish just made out of algae.
Isn't that bananas? Is it good?
Yeah.
Gotta be. I've heard you're part of V2 Foods as well. V2 is definitely good.
Yeah.
What do you do in something like V2?
Yeah, so the Climate Change Cluster, which is the research institute I work for, worked with V2 Foods over a number of years to help them develop a component as a part of their alternate meat product. And that component is made out of algae, so it helps people to identify when a meat that isn't, an animal-based meat goes from being pink and raw to that colour when it's cooked.
Okay, so you can have this vegetable-based colour-changing thing that acts like meat.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, what about young Henrys?
Yeah, everyone wants to talk about young Henrys, especially on a Friday.
4:30 on a Friday.
Yeah, so we as a research institute worked with them. We're still working with them. So one of the biggest emissions from breweries is carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, when you make your beer, it makes a whole bunch of carbon dioxide, which is a major contributor to climate change. Don't get me started on methane. That's for later, probably when you and I are talking. Yeah. But it's a really easy resource to capture because it just comes straight out of those vats when the beer's making. So we worked with them over a number of years to capture that carbon dioxide, pump it into these big vats of algae. Algae photosynthesizes just like trees, so it captures that carbon dioxide and produces oxygen. And then we're left with this just like green paste of captured carbon, which we then have turned into animal feed with their spent grain from their brewery, mixed it all up together, fed it to animals with the hope that it not only produces a really nutritional supplement for animals, but actually reduces their methane emissions as well.
Okay, it's amazing.
So there's probably like a 7-step process I just talked you through there, and I can understand if people are a little bit lost, but algae plus beer equals good beef. Yeah.
I think I skipped over this. How many different kinds of algae are there? Because I'm sure people don't realise.
Yeah, so most people aren't super familiar with algae. You might be familiar with macroalgae or seaweeds that you see on the beach. That's only a really small part of the story. Algae covers a whole group of organisms, all the way from macroalgae, seaweeds and kelps, to microorganisms such as microalgae, which are single-celled, which people usually only hear about if their pool's dirty or there's something like an algae bloom. But there's about 300,000 to 1 million different species across that space. We at UTS have about 200 that we typically work with. Globally, we're getting more and more. Obviously, as the demand grows, there's some really cool algae out there that can do cool things. And we actually have that capability with our robotic algae farms to make new types of algae as well.
And this is another cool part of this that, it's one thing to find it. There's an interesting mechanism in Queensland.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, so usually if you're using a natural product, there's lots of agreements globally that then if you're using that product, you would give royalties back to traditional landowners. In Queensland, we have that process already in place. It's called Nagoya Protocol. It's been ratified in Queensland. New South Wales, not quite there yet, but UTS is kind of taking a really clear pathway forward to make sure that those processes can be in place when they're available to be.
Yeah, it's got to be a matter of time. And isn't that wonderful to think that something found can help contribute to the local kind of historical owners?
Well, if you think about it, the whole reason it's in Queensland is because there's been really cool pharmaceuticals found on things like the Great Barrier Reef. So they take components out of the reef and they turn them into, really cool pharmaceuticals that can help lots of people. But, those are products that exist on traditional lands, and so we should, pay royalties and give those respects back. Okay,
beautiful. So pharmaceuticals as well, an interesting area.
Oh gosh, yeah.
There's a long list of things. Water treatment, foam additive.
Foams, yep. Should we run through a bit of a list? Yeah. So I think if we can kind of break it into two main things, so algae can make products, but it can also perform services. So it can do things like treat wastewater or capture that kind of runoff water and stop it from entering things like reefs and back into rivers and that sort of thing. Captures all those extra nutrients. It can capture carbon. So we at UTS actually have a spin out called Green Genie, which kind of maximises on that carbon capture mechanism of algae. It's just photosynthesis. We've just made it turbocharged. All the way through to developing some new components within the cells to then use for other things. And then if we think about products, it's everything from medicines, pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, foods, cosmetics, to components that go into shoes and clothing, foams. Obviously, we've just seen the fibres over there as well. And then it's plastics, building materials, anything that you can kind of put your mind to, honestly, you can probably find something that you can use algae for.
Okay. And so lots of universities do lots of interesting things.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people criticise universities for not being, porous enough, not getting the research out, not making it as accessible. And there's probably people at home going, oh, this is cool. I'm not going to be able to engage with that.
Yeah.
I love what you do and have started and built up over the years, because it's the one program of its kind that I know of that is taking this kind of science and building structured kind of programs around how companies can engage in it and receive funding to do it and receive support to do it.
Yeah.
Tell us about Green Light.
Yeah, so I think a while ago the university obviously has this critical mass of research and researchers that are working in this space. It's obviously has a huge potential to impact not only climate but a whole bunch of new innovative products and services. But we can't do this alone. So the university, along with the New South Wales government through Boosting Business Innovation Program, developed the Deep Green Biotech Hub, which is exactly this. It's a mechanism for people to come in, interact, be able to kind of gain access and resources. And one of the core programs of the Deep Green Biotech Hub is our accelerator program called Green Light, which allows people to come in with an idea. They don't even have to have a prototype. It just can be an idea. And with all the resources that the program offers, hopefully get from idea to a prototype within that time period. And it's really kind of backed by this research strength within UTS.
So I can come in and say, I've got this kind of pipe network as part of my company. I'd like to make it kind of clog less or process water better or whatever else, and start to explore that with yourselves.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. And so 2018, that was started?
2018, we started the first cohort of Green Light. The program has changed shape quite a bit since then. We've had 4 different cohorts come through, usually a mixture of startups, entrepreneurs and small businesses are also eligible if they want to start a new product or something as a part of what they're offering. And we've had, 12 different teams go through? 15 different teams go through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's your favourite? Or what are some interesting things that have come through?
Oh, yeah. So we've worked with seaweed farmers to help them set up different types of nurseries so they can put seaweed out in the ocean, actually grow more seaweed. We've worked with people to develop new food products. One of the things we've done a lot of work with is there's been a number of different startups we've worked with to develop education programs so they can actually go into schools and teach people about algae. All the way through to a really cool thing last year was a team came up with a product called an air tree, which was like a big kind of structure that contained seaweed and acted like a air filter for offices. And we worked with them to kind of, they did all the work, we just kind of advised them. But we took them all the way to Splendor in the Grass and they were able to showcase that as a part of that program.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Face masks?
Face masks.
Hand sanitizer?
Hand sanitizer. There's been new food products. There has been, can't even remember, different types of beer. Yeah, there's been all sorts of things. So I think algae is really just this toolbox that's sort of like, I have an idea, I think this is where I can kind of go with it. And it has so many amazing applications that it's sort of like the sky's the limit. And it's our job to help people kind of on that journey as well.
Okay, I'm going to ask the most difficult question, which is like, what would you like to see that you haven't seen so far?
Oh boy. I would love to see some more like cosmetics and skincare stuff, and I'd love to see some more food products because I think there's a huge amount of applications in that space and people are really excited by it, and I think we can do a lot more work in there.
We have so many food and drink companies around the place that are doing really interesting things like savvy beverages, etc. I'm sure there's a place for algae and the kind of nutrition that can be provided and quality of kind of texture, whatever else you can do with it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure they're about to apply. How do they get involved from here? Yeah,
so if you look up Deep Green Biotech Hub or Green Light online, you should find a web page. It'll give you all the program details, T's and C's, everything like that. We have applications close on the 17th of June. It's a pretty easy process. You book an EOI, you have a chat to our program coordinators. They'll say, this idea sounds great, help you to kind of put together your application, submit an application, that gets reviewed, and then off you go.
Okay. Nice and easy, and $10,000.
$10,000, yes. So
not equity-based, there's a grant.
Not equity-based, not IP-based. It is just, here is some money to help you on your journey to get this product piloted.
And I'll say incredible program as well. Now being led by Jane Oja, who's ex-Fishburners, wonderful person who I now get to work with again. But the quality of workshops and other things that are part of it is fantastic. Yeah,
so it's a 12-week program. The teams get a science mentor from the Research Institute to kind of help them work through some different things. Jane's obviously there, and there's a whole bunch of different workshops as well to help people go from that idea through to business modelling, pitching. And we have some really, really cool external companies who are helping us out along the way, which I'm sure when we're able to tell people, it will be very exciting. And of course there's that funding as well. So it's kind of been building over the years to the point where we can kind of say we think these types of businesses need this sort of support to get them on their way, and I think we're pretty happy with the program and excited to see what happens.
Okay, beautiful. So final question, looking forward, what does Australia look like with a vibrant algae ecosystem?
The $1 million question. Look, there is so much potential for this, and I think every time I go overseas, everyone's sort of saying, why isn't there more algae stuff happening in Australia? Which sounds like a weird question to be asking if you're just a regular person, but to me that's a pretty normal question. I think there's just so much potential, I think, in so many different industries, food and beverage, carbon capture, wastewater treatment, all these sorts of things, and we have the benefit of having a lot of space in Australia. We have a lot of sunshine. There are things that we can use to grow a whole bunch of different algae. And, you know, there's so many innovations that have already come out of Australia in this space. You know, for people that don't know, Asparagopsis is a type of seaweed that you can feed to cattle, reduces their methane emissions. That's an Australian innovation. So people are really kind of moving into this space, and there's so many different opportunities. And I would love to see more products out there using algae, more kind of carbon being captured using algae, and more of the science that we see in universities actually getting out there in the hands of people that can turn it into things.
Well, it will. Someone watching this or someone in the audience will come down and do something amazing over the next 6 months.
Yep.
Plus all the other support that I know comes after that as well.
Yep.
And I look forward to it. But anyone watching at home misses out on what comes next. We're going to turn off the camera and do a private Q&A where we get into the kind of really juicy parts of algae and what you've seen. Please join us every Friday at 3:30 at UTS Startups at Central for the next Confessions. And for now, join me in thanking Alex Thomson.
Thank you.